DND number 10, Circle of Life in Jesus' Name, Part 2, Chapter 19. It's September 21st, Saturday late afternoon, en route to the LA Memorial Coliseum. Young Eric glanced over at the beautiful girl sitting in the passenger seat. She smiled up at him. He checked his rearview mirror to make sure Mrs. Perez and the kids were still behind him since they couldn't all fit in his M4. That dinner was absolutely fantastic. Does your mom always cook like that? Jordan gave a short laugh. No. She can't afford to cook like that. I mean, paella calls for shrimp and lobster, though she didn't use the lobster. Still, it's expensive. Paella. Anyway, he frowned. He'd known she would spend money that they didn't have to make him a good meal, but he didn't know how to ask to pay for the ingredients without insulting her. He still didn't, but he'd think of something. Well, I'm not complaining, Three, if that's what you think. Just being honest. Don't feel bad. She wanted to cook for you. She loves cooking, and she loves seeing the look of pleasure on people's faces when they take that first bite. She spent some money on the ingredients, and I donated with some of my college money. Then would you accept a donation from me? Absolutely not. You've already done so much for me, he sighed. Okay, he'd make it up to them somewhere else. Anyway, what's the name of that potato dish again? Patatas bravas? That stuff was amazing. She nodded. It's one of my favorite dishes. He changed the subject. So I was wondering if Josie is okay. But if you don't want to share it with me, I'll understand. Yes, sorry. I was going to tell you what she said because I will accept your help with something to do with her. In a nutshell, she doesn't want to see her father anymore. She's afraid of him. She knows he hurt me and that he went to jail for it, and neither she nor Jamie really remember him, and they don't like him. She says he only yells at her and Jamie and spends his time talking to Mom or yelling at her. But the big thing, she said, is he went into my bedroom and was going through my stuff, and Josie told him I would be mad if he went through my stuff, and he grabbed her and he shook her and pretty much threatened her to keep her mouth shut. Eric's jaw clenched tight, and he had to fight the anger down. He thought of tiny little Josie, small for her 10 years, probably due to lack of nutrition. He thought of a man grabbing her frail little body and shaking her. He shook his head. Josie looked a lot like Jordan, except different coloring. She looked meek, angelic, and gentle. Eric's feelings of anger were inconsequential, though, and he needed to get himself together for Jordan's sake. He nodded at her. So they're going to eventually find him, and he will be arrested. Until then, we'll make sure there's an agent on your family, not just when you're there, but all the time. Jordan nodded. I would so appreciate that, though I know Ameritech agents are super expensive. He sighed. This money thing has got to be talked about and made to go away. Listen, my father said he would take care of the expenses. I know, but Jordan, do you know how much money my father has? I've heard billions, multi-billions. Do you know how much $1 billion is? Yes, she said, raising her chin. I'm not talking down to you, babe, but I think you don't understand just how much money that is. And he's making more every day because of royalty residuals and mostly because of my grandfather's and Justin's investment plans. And that's just my dad's acting career. He has other business investments, and he will eventually completely own Kino Martial Arts, which rakes in the dough and is a multi-billion-dollar business. And business is multiplying since everything that's happened with my grandfather getting shot, and even before that with Granddad training Gabe Tanner for that mini-mart. And forget about my dad. My mom is also rocking it, so there is no problem with my dad paying to have even a slew of agents follow you all around. And for all I know, that might be what Uncle Joey will arrange when I tell him this new information. Jordan sighed. Okay, I'll try to not worry about the money thing. You have to understand, we've always struggled. Sometimes just buying a loaf of bread was difficult. He nodded. I understand. I do. And I'm going to change all that, he thought. Now, you said a minute ago that you would accept my help about something. Were you talking about protecting your family or something else? Well, yes, protecting my family with the agents, but also in other ways. There's a couple of things. First, even though when my father is found he'll be arrested, I would like to make sure the cops know he's not allowed to come to see my sister or brother or mom. But he is allowed. Exactly. I would like to ask your Uncle Mark to get a restraining order based on what Josie told me today. I want his visitation rights revoked and a restraining order because of the way he bullies my mom. I mean, I know she's afraid of him. And Josie told me that my mom makes her give him the hug he demands every time he shows up because if she tries to refuse, he gets mad. Eric nodded. Okay, we'll talk to Uncle Mark. What else? Jordan sighed. I would like to get Josie a cell phone so that she can call me, or you, if Peter shows up at the house. She'll keep the phone a secret, keep it back in our bedroom, and if he comes, or if Mom tells her he's coming, she can call us real quick, and we can have someone there to intercept. This is going to sound awful, but I don't trust Mom to let us know because she's afraid or timid or something. It kind of makes me mad, but whatever. If Josie has a phone, I know I can depend on her. Eric nodded. Good plan. Let's do it. Jordan breathed a sigh of relief. Eric smiled at her. It's all going to be okay, Jordan. Don't worry, baby. She nodded. Incoming call. Except, young Eric said. Hey, Dad. Son, you on the way to the game? Yes, sir. I'm just calling the fam for a quick prayer circle for Cam. Oh, no. How bad is it? Eric asked, his voice filled with concern. It's not too bad. He got into a knife fight, but he won, so there's that. He's being life-flighted to the hospital. He will get stitches, but he lost a lot of blood. Knife nicked the artery in his forearm. So I'll send a link. Join it at 5:45. Will do. Can I call anyone else for you? Nope, got it covered. Taylor and Gabe were a huge help. Of course they were. Okay, 5:45. See you then. He glanced at Jordan's pale face. I know it sounds bad, but he'll be okay. How do you know? I just feel it, like a feeling of peace came over me. But he's lost a lot of blood, and poor Dr. Keno, she's pregnant with their first baby. She's got to be terrified. Aunt Jeffy is probably not terrified. She probably knew he was going to be all right before everyone else. And if she was scared, Dad would have told me to let me know how serious it is. Well then, why even bother to pray? Jordan asked, her brow raised. He smiled at her. Well, we don't take things for granted, so we pray to give thanks that he's still alive, that it wasn't worse than it was, and that nothing else will go wrong, that he'll land at the hospital with no problems, that he'll heal quickly, those kinds of things. Jordan nodded. Gotcha. I wasn't being disrespectful, just trying to understand. He took her hand. I know. He sighed. I love you, Jordan. Everything you do, everything you say, every question you ask is so endearing. You are special, my love. He brought her hand to his lips and kissed her fingertips. She smiled at him. I love you too, 3. I am so freaking much in love with you that it hurts. No, don't hurt, baby. Just relish the feeling. Every night, I tell God how grateful I am that I saw you that day, that I saw you jump on that lug wrench. He chuckled. And you thought I might be like a serial killer or something. She grinned at him. Well, you totally slayed me. He laughed. And she tells dad jokes. Can you be any more perfect? New scene. It's still September 21st, Saturday, early evening. Once the prayer circle was over, Eric and Shelley kissed the children and left for the game. Jeffy was in her own car right behind them. She took her car so in case Cam needed to leave the game early, she could drive him home. Eric glanced over at his wife. She was still giving him the silent treatment. He smiled. She could be pretty stubborn if she wanted. Apparently, she wanted. But he had to do what he had to do. He cleared his throat. Sweetheart? Silence. You know, I'm only trying to help you. She turned to glare at him. Accusing me that I don't love our children is not helpful. I didn't say you don't love them. I asked you if you loved them. She frowned. Don't be playing your mind games on me. No games, Shelley girl. This is serious. I asked you if you love them to get you to realize that you do love them. She sighed. Of course I do. Stupid question, she muttered. You would love any little 2-year-old who showed up at your door, especially one with no mother or father, or who'd been kept locked away in a daycare all of their lives, or one who'd been given away by the only mother he'd known to his aunt and who never went outside to play. Her eyes narrowed. Yes, of course. Whose heart wouldn't go out to children like that? Right. Anyone's children. She nodded. What's your point, Eric? But these aren't just anyone's children, right? They're ours. They were made from our bodies, our DNA. They belong to us. Well, they actually belong to God, but He gave them to us. Yeah, He did finally. Eric mulled over that response, and he glanced at her while he drove. The light was flickering, starting to come on for him, but he wasn't going to solve this tonight. Shelley, I'm going to change the subject for a minute. What are you grateful for? Did I ask you for a therapy session? He hid his smile. No, but I'm your husband, and that's what I do. Well, may I request my husband to please stop trying to analyze me? You may request anything, but I'm giving you fair warning. I will get to the bottom of whatever your problem is. And like I said earlier today, as your husband, I won't stand idly by and let you work yourself until you drop from exhaustion. I love you. I want you well. I want you happy. I want you to enjoy being with me and the children. And you know me well enough that I won't just let this drop. She sighed. There's something keeping you from accepting help. There's something keeping you from smiling. I'm not sure when it started. It might have begun back when I was in the hospital that first week you had the children alone. What is going on, Shelley? Why do you feel so overwhelmed and so sad? I don't know what's wrong. I don't know why I feel sad. I don't know why I feel frustrated. I don't know why I feel so confused and just plain lost. I don't know why I'm mad at you. I don't know anything. He smiled and nodded. Stage 2. Get her to admit all is not well and state her feelings. Done. That was enough for today. Okay, sweetheart, don't worry. We'll get to the bottom of it and we'll figure it out and you'll feel so much better very soon. Do you trust me? She was silent as she thought and finally nodded. Yes, of course I do. You've always been there for me. Well, almost always. He nodded. Another clue. Okay, well, trust me now. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere for at least 15 years, so we'll figure this out. 15 years? What is that supposed to mean? He laughed. Hezekiah was given 15 more years to live, remember? So I figure I'll be given at least that, maybe more, or maybe less. Think positive, babe. He held out his hand. Sighing, she reluctantly placed her hand in his, and he brought it to his lips and kissed her fingertips. New scene. Young Eric motioned for Mrs. Perez to pull in right next to him in the parking garage. He clapped his hands as Jordan and her family stood around him. Well now, Jamie and Josie and Mrs. Perez, Jordan and I have on the right colors, but you guys do not. And we can't have that. So, first things first, as soon as we get in, we're going to go pick up some team jerseys. You don't have to get JoJo's name if you'd prefer someone else's jersey. Jordan laughed. What a silly statement. Who wants JoJo's jersey? We do, the kid said. They headed in and went straight to purchase jerseys, all of them with JoJo's name and number. JoJo's jersey was one of the few that had his nickname on the back instead of his surname. Everyone pulled the jersey on and they headed to their seats. Young Eric's parents and sister were already there, and Jeff and his boys, and of course his Uncle Mark and Uncle Joey, and his Aunt Bella and Aunt Breeze and Logan, with a girl. Neither his grandparents nor his Aunt Jeffy were there yet. Introductions were made all around. Young Eric's mother called to Mrs. Perez. Jewel, please come sit next to me. I'm dying to get to know you, Bree said. Smiling, Jordan watched as her mother went to sit next to one of her favorite actresses. And Josie, Taylor said, please come sit with me. Josie did, and Taylor grinned at her and turned her phone to Josie. Josie, meet Gabe. Hey, Josie, Gabe said kindly. So nice to meet you. Josie's face turned red. Hi, she said softly. Taylor giggled. Don't be shy. He's really nice, and we're going to end the call in a minute anyway, and then you and I can talk and stuff. Josie nodded. Jamie, come sit with us, Daniel and Jeremy Davis said. We got you covered. Jamie looked up at Jordan. Can I? Of course. But don't let those guys talk you into doing anything crazy. They're a couple of hoodlums, young Eric said with a laugh. Look who's talking, Jeff Davis said. Jordan looked up at Eric with a question. What's he talking about? Um, my younger years. Maybe I'll tell you about it sometime. Young Eric and Jordan took their seats on row 8 where Logan sat with his date. Jordan sat down next to the girl and smiled at her. Hello, Angie, right? Jordan greeted. The girl nodded politely. Yes, Angie, hi. So, have you known Logan long? Jordan asked, glancing over at the handsome guy whose voice could melt the heart of any girl. She shook her head. Nope, I just met him a few weeks ago. He's in my lit class. Cool, Jordan said. She turned and smiled up at Eric when he took her hand. So, how'd he talk you into coming to the game with him? Young Eric asked. I'm sitting right here, right? Logan asked, making them laugh. Angie smiled at young Eric. We were talking about Shakespeare and the festival that's happening at Griffin Park, and I asked him if he was interested, and he told me he couldn't come because of his brother's game, and asked if I'd like to come. She smiled at Eric again, looking him in the eye. So you're a Keno, right? Young Eric's eyes cut to Logan, who glanced up at Eric. Logan sighed. Eric frowned. Yes. Why do you ask? Well, I mean, the Kenos are pretty famous. Yeah, but so are the Adams, Eric rebutted. I mean, Logan's dad is Brianna Adams' brother, and Logan's uncle is Joey Adams, who is the current Keno Challenge champion, and Logan himself is going to be super famous one day. Really? Angie said, turning to look at him. What for? Logan just shook his head. Because he sings and plays like a dozen instruments, and he's going to be a huge star. But Brianna Adams is actually your mother, right? And Ricky Keno is your dad, right? And that gorgeous Taylor Keno is your sister, right? Yep, and with all that, compared to me, I'm nothing. I don't think you're nothing. Just look at you. Yep, just look at me. Frowning, he stood and clapped as the team came on the field to warm up. Jordan also stood and let loose a whistle, accidentally startling Angie. Or was it accidental? Young Eric smiled at her, and she shrugged. This would be a cool time for you to speak Chinese to me, Jordan said quietly to 3. Why? 'Cause I have some things to say that I don't want someone else to hear. Eric patted her hand. Calm down, Tiger. It's okay. We're used to it. I see what you mean now. It sucks, but hey, it's the world we live in. He leaned over. Angie, young Eric said, so do you speak any other languages? No. Why? I was just wondering because Jordan and I were just talking about it. Eric smiled. Hey, Logan, he said, getting his cousin's attention. And then he says, let's see if I can say this, Jordan está preocupado por ti. Jordan is worried about you. Tell her no si es, estoy bien. Tell her don't be, I'm okay. I did. Encontrarás el correcto. You'll find the right one, eventually. Whatever, bro, he murmured and then stood. Would you like to come with me to the concession stand, Angie? No, that's okay, but hey, if you're going, will you grab me a Dr. Pepper? Yep. Thank you so much. No problem. He looked at Jordan. You guys want anything? No thanks, Logan. We had a huge dinner right before we came, thanks to my mom. As Logan started down, his grandparents finally arrived. Hey, Grandma, Granddad, Logan greeted. Logan, Grandmaster Keno said, shaking his hand and pulling him in for a hug. You okay? Yep, just another date that's not working out. They both looked up to see the girl he was speaking about. The right one will come, Eric said softly. The elder Kenos greeted everyone, were introduced to Angie, Jewel, Jamie, and Josie, and took their seats. Just a few minutes later, Jeffy arrived. Jeff Davis quickly got up and took her arm and led her to her seat. Have you heard anything else? Jeff asked. I just spoke to him. He's all stitched up and actually was given some blood, and he's about to head this way. He sounds okay. Good. Well, until he gets here, you need anything, just let me know. She smiled at him. You're still my favorite agent. He chuckled. But am I still cute? Oh, absolutely, she chimed. So who's that Dr. Keno is talking to down there? Angie asked as she leaned over Jordan to speak to young Eric. That's Jeff Davis. I'll introduce you to him later. You'll like him. He's famous too, he said excitedly. Jordan burst out laughing, then put her hand over her mouth. She then leaned toward Angie. So, have you ever been to a football game before? No, I've always thought football is just a rough game for mindless jocks and a bunch of beer-drinking guys screaming at the TV. Well, actually, it's pretty interesting. Just let me know if you don't understand what's happening, and I'll be happy to explain it to you. You might find you like it. Well, I very much doubt that. Jordan frowned. So, if you truly dislike football that much, why did you agree to come to the game with Logan? Well, everyone knows Logan comes from a famous family. I mean, the Kenos, you know? Everyone in this country would love to actually meet a Keno. Why? You're kidding, right? I mean, look at you. You're like dating a Keno. How lucky is that? Jordan glanced up at 3 to see if he could hear the conversation, though she'd been trying to keep her voice low. However, Angie wasn't even trying to keep it down. It was as if she didn't care that he heard her. It was as if to her he wasn't a real person with feelings. He was a Keno, a show pony, nothing more. The look on 3's face told Jordan that he was indeed hearing what was being said. I'm dating a Keno because we have feelings for each other, not because he's famous. Yeah, you keep telling yourself that. Jordan's mouth opened in surprise, and she sighed. You know, it's a shame that you can't see what a prize Logan is. And anyway, he's part of the same family. My Eric's grandparents are also Logan's grandparents. Yes, but Logan is just Logan Adams, and you're dating Eric Keno. That's a big difference. Angie, I'm trying to be kind to you, but can't you see that your perspective is about as shallow as one can be? Angie shrugged. You asked me why I came. I told you. I was honest. Wow. Angie motioned at Ricky Keno, who rose from his seat. I wonder where he's going. I'd love to get a pic with him. Jordan just shook her head. She watched Eric's father go down one road to speak with Jeff Davis. He shook his hand and then shook the hands of Daniel and Jeremy Davis and then shook Jamie's hand. Jordan smiled. Then Mr. Keno knelt in front of Jamie and was having a conversation with the 8-year-old. Jordan smiled up at 3. He nodded and smiled back. She sighed. When 3 smiled at her, she felt so full, so satisfied, so content, so safe, so protected, so loved. All of that just from his smile. So, Angie began, why are all the players leaving the field? It's only for a few minutes. They're going to have a quick meeting in the locker room and come back out. They'll have the national anthem and the game will start. How long does the game last? Jordan smiled. Well, there are 4 quarters of 15 minutes. So the game lasts about an hour? Jordan chuckled. The game lasts about 3 hours because, like, they stop the clock when someone with the ball goes out of bounds, or on an incomplete pass, or during timeouts, or to reset the play after a first down, or for an injury. And then there's halftime, where the bands will play. Oh, yeah, that part might be interesting. So you do like music? Sure, doesn't everyone? But you're not impressed that Logan is a musician and a singer? Well, I've never heard him sing. Well, he can sing, take my word for it. About that time, Logan came back. I was wondering when you'd be back, and you said you were gone a long time. Yeah, the crowd is crazy out there. He handed a drink to her. Here you go. Thank you. So, I was wondering, would you take me down and introduce me to Ricky Keno? He's like related to you, right? He's my uncle. Cool. And like Brianna Adams, she's your aunt, right? Yes, she's my aunt, but her legal last name is actually Keno because she's married to Ricky. She just keeps Adam as her professional name because that's the name everyone knows her by. And like your father is her brother, right? Right. So if you want to get a pic with them, come on, let's do it now, because once the game starts, I'll be watching the game. Because your brother is the quarterback, right? Yep. Logan held out his hand, and he walked Angie down to get a picture with his Aunt Bree and Uncle Rick. Jordan watched them go. She looked over at 3 and took his hand. I'm sorry, 3. You said on the very first day I met you that you have a hard time meeting people who didn't want something from you. I thought that was no big deal, but you know what? It's actually pretty sad. He grinned. No, you were right in the first place. It's no big deal. I'm not a victim, and Logan's not a victim. It's just sad that people are so, like you call it, shallow. It's just that their priorities are all mixed up. If you worship fame and fortune and idolize people, how will you ever find God? So, we really need to have compassion for her and help any way we can, though I'm at a loss as to how to get through to her. But I'm not worried about it. God will touch her heart when the time is right. Jordan leaned close to him. When you say stuff like that, 3, when you show how deep your heart is, it makes me fall in love with you even more. She turned her face up to him and he kissed her. Good, 'cause I am in love with you, 2-3. She grinned. The teams came back out, the national anthem was sung, the game started, and everyone's attention was focused on JoJo. Though from the very beginning it looked like it was going to be an easy win. They were playing Fresno State. By the end of the first quarter, the score was 28-3. Everyone's focus changed, though, when Cam made his way up toward his seat. Since Jeff was the closest, he leapt up and ran down to escort him. Cam waved him off, but Jeff still walked behind him. Jeffy looked her husband over as he approached. He had a butterfly bandage on his cheek, which just made him look pitiful. His right forearm was wrapped in a thick gauze bandage, and his right arm was in a sling. Jeffy stood as Cam came to her. She put her hands on his shoulders and looked into his eyes. Oh, Cam, I hate when you get hurt. He smiled. I know, but I'm okay, Jeffy. Really. She touched his shoulder. Your shoulder is bandaged too? Yes, 2 big slices, forearm and shoulder. And then this, he said, touching his face. But I'm okay, babe. Are you sure you feel like watching the game? Yeah, it's my nephew, Heisman candidate, playing football. I wouldn't miss it. It's a cupcake game, Jeffy reminded him. It doesn't matter, I'm staying. Cam took a minute to turn and wave or nod at or greet the other members of his family, and then had a seat. So that guy that just arrived, he's Dr. Keno's husband, right? Angie asked Logan. He nodded without taking his eyes off the field. What happened to him? He's a security agent, and he was helping rescue some people, and someone attacked him with a knife. Oh, wow. She was silent in a moment. So if he's a security guy, does that mean he's armed? Yes. But I mean, is he armed right now? Probably. Do you think that's a good idea? Yes. I mean, in this big crowd of people, do you think it's good that he's armed? Logan finally looked at her. Yeah. And you'd think it was good too if someone started shooting because Uncle Cam would take them out. Or Uncle Joey, or Mr. Davis, because they're all security agents and they're all armed. Well, I just don't understand how anyone can think that a gun saves lives. Jordan sighed and shook her head. She'd recently learned that when Logan was 11 years old, he'd had to use a gun to shoot his father in order to save his mother's life. Jordan had a feeling that this girl and Logan were definitely not going to work out. New scene. It's September 21st, Saturday night, South Keno Estate, Crystal Cove, California. It was late by the time they'd all gotten back to the house. Bree showed Jewel Perez to her room and told her if there was anything she needed to please call her cell, and she put her number into Jewel's phone. She hugged her and told her what a lovely family she had, and then said goodnight. Jamie had fallen asleep in the car, and young Eric carried him to the room next door to his mother. Josie decided she wanted to stay the night with her sister. So, reluctantly, young Eric kissed Jordan goodnight and then went to visit his sister in her room because he felt like he hadn't been giving her much attention lately. Once everyone was in their respective rooms, Jordan and Josie went to say goodnight to their mother. They knocked on Jewel's door and were told to come in. Jewel smiled at her daughters. Hey, Mom, Jordan said. I just wanted to say goodnight and make sure you're okay. Do you need anything? No, dear, but thank you. This has been a fun day, hasn't it? Jordan smiled. Yes, it has. And thank you, Mom, for making such a delicious dinner for Eric. He couldn't stop talking about how good it was. Jewel smiled. I'm so glad to do it. Well, I guess we'd better say goodnight. They wake up early in this house, and we have to be ready to leave for church by 9. What do you think about going to church? Jewel asked. I think it will be interesting. Eric, really his whole family, They have a strong faith, and I have to say, the things he says make a lot of sense. The miracles he's told me about, I mean, it's pretty cool and makes me want to feel that closeness to God like he does. Jewel nodded. I haven't been to church in a long time. I didn't know you ever went to church. When I was young, before I married your father. Maybe it's time. Jordan nodded. I think it's going to be fun going to church with them, and Taylor's so nice, Josie said. The whole family is really nice, Jewel said. They're just so kind to everyone and so loving to each other. I mean, Mr. Keno took time to talk to Jamie personally, and he's so loving to his wife. I really like them. They're not at all what I expected. Jordan laughed. What did you expect, Mom? Jewel smiled. I don't know. I guess I thought they'd be a little standoffish or snobby, but they're just good people. They really are. I mean, look at 3. He's such a good guy. He'd have to be raised by good people. You're in love with him, aren't you, sweetie? I am, Mom. I really am. Lord, I hope he doesn't suddenly come to his senses and dump me. Nonsense. Why would he do that? She shook her head. Actually, Grandmaster Keno says I'm not supposed to think like that. He says I am worthy of love. I am worthy of 3's love. I hope so. It does seem too good to be true to find someone who gets me, who is so honorable. I didn't know guys like him even existed. Jewel hugged both her girls. I know it seems like good men are few and far between. I can't blame you. But there are good guys out there. Don't give up hope. New scene. Hey, Eric. To what do I owe this honor? Taylor asked her big brother. He smiled. I just haven't had much of a chance to chat with my little sister and thought I'd see how you're doing. So, tell me, are you all over the QB Lance thing? She waved her hand. Been over that. I'm not playing victim if that's what you mean. Okay, how about when you passed out in the bathroom at school? She frowned. I still have some work to do there. Gabe said he's going to do some exposure therapy with me when he gets back. Then he definitely is coming back. I mean, for the mini-mart? I haven't heard if it's definite. Yes, it's definite. I'm surprised Granddad hasn't mentioned it to you, because from what I understand, he's going to be training with you. Oh, well, I didn't know that. That's very cool. I think so, too. And Mom and Dad and I are leaving after my volleyball game Thursday night to fly to Nashville, and Gabe is meeting me there, and we're going to rehearse with Miss Caroline and perform on Monday night and fly home on Tuesday morning. So I'll have the house to myself. Taylor grinned. So, Eric, tell me about you and Jordan. He shrugged. What's to tell? You two are getting pretty close. He nodded. We are. You're in love with her. He nodded with a smile. I am. Happened pretty fast, huh? Like it was meant to be. Are you going to marry her? I really hope so. Have you proposed? Not yet. I thought I'd wait at least until after my 21st birthday. Or not, I just don't know. I love her, Taylor said. I do too, Eric agreed. If you propose and she says yes, when will you marry her? I mean, won't Mom and Dad want you to wait until you're older? Well, I've already spoken to Dad about it, and he said some surprising things, like about the world and like what the establishment says about things, and that convention isn't always the correct way. So I think he's open to me marrying her. He just wants me to have a plan, to know how I'll support her and stuff like that. Well, didn't you just make a cool $1 million on that movie? Well, I made more than that. Still, I'm not sure if that's actually what I want to do. Didn't you tell me that you really enjoyed it? I did. I really did. It actually surprised me how much I enjoyed it, but I also want to use my brain. I mean, I may still do something in the field of aeronautics or math or physics. Maybe. See, I'm just not sure, and Dad says I need to have a plan. So I've prayed about it, and now I'm waiting for God's answer. Taylor nodded. Thanks for sharing that with me, Eric. I know I'm just a little sister, so it feels good that you would share that with me. Well, you're more than just a little sister, little sister. You're an amazing person, and I'm blessed to have you for my sis. Thanks, Eric, and right back at you. Well, that's enough warm fuzzies for the night. The morning comes fast. Get some sleep. He moved forward and hugged her. Out in the hall, he looked up as Jordan and Josie came out of their mother's room and headed toward the room they were sharing. Well, hey there, ladies. Hey, we were just saying goodnight to Mom. He nodded. Is she okay? Yes, she's great. She says she had a wonderful day and that she just really likes your family. Well, I think they really like her. He smiled. Well, good night, ladies. Jordan smiled and stood on her toes and kissed his cheek. Good night, 3. He breathed a sigh. Good night. New scene. It's September 22nd, Sunday afternoon, Big Canyon Church of Christ, Newport, California. They decided to attend the Big Canyon Church of Christ. The decision had come because this particular church was very good at making new attendees feel very welcome. Today, they'd lived up to their reputation. They'd taken little Jamie and Josie, Jordan and Jewel under their wing. They divided up into different Sunday school classes. The pastor's eyes had lit up when he realized the Kenos were in attendance today and had immediately invited Eric Sr. to speak. So, when everyone adjourned from their separate classes and met back in the large chapel, everyone was excited to hear the elder Keno's testimony. After his dying and meeting with Jesus and miraculously coming back to life. Jordan knew what had happened because she followed Gabe and Taylor on social media. She had shared the tale with her family. Still, listening to Grandmaster Keno tell it from his perspective, to tell of the peace and the love he felt from being in the presence of the Savior, and then the conflict of wanting to stay with Jesus and having compassion on his family and wanting to be with them also. It was an amazing story he told. As he told it, not only did Jordan feel tears fill her eyes, but she felt a stirring in her heart. Something was telling her that this Jesus, someone who lived over 2,000 years ago, was not just a cool story, but he was real. He existed, and he proclaimed to be the Son of a living God, and his disciples testified that he died and came back to life. Apparently, this blew them away, and they went around and told everyone about it with such fervency that thousands per day were convicted of the truth of their words. And they didn't have the internet back then. Grandmaster Keno just pointed out, making the congregation chuckle. She looked down at her hand when 3 clasped it in his own, then looked up into his eyes. They too were moist. You feel it, don't you? He whispered. I feel something. I don't know what it is. It's the Holy Spirit. It's the same Holy Spirit that moved through those people 2,000 years ago that convicted them of the truth of what the apostles were teaching. It's moving through me and convicting me, and I think that's what you're feeling. There really is something happening, she admitted. It's a good feeling. He smiled. Gabe says it's addictive. She smiled up at the guy with whom she was deeply in love. I get it. She shook her head as a tear escaped. 3, you are changing my life. No, not me. God is moving in your life. I'm just a part of his plan for you. So you think you and me, we were meant to be? Yes, I do. She smiled. I think I'm beginning to believe the same thing. And that is the end of chapter 19.